Hello aspirants, welcome to APTI Plus Academy for Civil Services. In this UPSC weekly current affairs session, we are going to discuss the topics that were in news in the last week of September. So in this session, we are going to discuss the topics that are mentioned over here. Okay, India's first global defense facility in Morocco, pandemic emergency, new RAMSAR sites in Bihar, okay, then Ladakh protests, etc. So let's get started. So the topic is India's first global defense facility in Morocco. Recently, our defense minister inaugurated the Tata Advanced Systems Limited defense manufacturing facility in Morocco and also signed a MOU, that is Memorandum of Understanding on Defense Cooperation. This is going to be India's first overseas defense plant by any private firm. So India's step to set up a manufacturing plant, defense manufacturing plant in Morocco is quite significant, especially because India is right now in a highly vulnerable foreign policy scenario. We all know about the recent trade war with the United States, where it imposed tariffs on India, right? 50% tariffs, even 100% tariffs on certain products like pharmaceuticals. Okay, so we are of course under pressure. Simultaneously, there are tensions with Pakistan which have resurfaced following the Operation Sindoor and Pahalgam terror attack, of course. So this has compelled India to strengthen its defense preparedness and modernize its armed forces. Our relations even with Bangladesh, which was once a very strong partner of India, it has faced friction over border and water issues. It is not good. And most importantly, China's string of pearls strategy continues to tighten its strategic grip in the Indian Ocean and surround India with military and economic posts. So what is this string of pearls strategy of China? So this string of pearls is basically a geopolitical theory which is related to the potential Chinese intentions in the Indian Ocean region. It was coined by the US itself, okay, and it basically refers to the network of Chinese military and commercial facilities and relationships along its sea lines of communication. Now this extends from Chinese mainland to the Sudan port. So basically, China is building a network of commercial and military facilities, and this includes ports, bases and diplomatic ties, okay, in various countries along the key sea lanes. This includes the Gwadar port in Pakistan, then Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, Djibouti in Africa, and then there are other ports in Myanmar and Maldives as well. Now to counter this, India has its necklace of diamonds policy. So basically, India has secured access to key ports in the regions. For example, Chabahar in Iran, we all know about, okay, Sabang in Indonesia, then Duqm in Oman. These are the things that India is doing to counter China's policy. And India's first global defense facility in Morocco is a welcome step in this direction only, because this expands India's defense diplomacy footprint in Africa also, right? And since it's a defense manufacturing plant, it will strengthen the local capacity of that place in Morocco, and it will create jobs. At the same time, it will also support our national strategies, national interests like Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is self-reliance, make in India, make with friends, and make for the world. It not only enhances India-Morocco defense relations, but also supports the South-South cooperation. Now, what is this South-South cooperation? So, South or Global South, it basically defines the regions in the world that have similar political, social and economic histories, okay, and these are rooted in disparities that occurred during the colonial or the imperialist era, okay. So we can say that they have the similar ideological expression of the concerns that are faced by developing countries or developing regions, okay. Now, the South-South cooperation, this particular term, it is historically used by policymakers to describe the exchange of resources, technology and knowledge between the developing countries. So since India is also a developing country and Morocco is also a developing country, so this particular manufacturing plant will definitely give a boost to or enhance the South-South cooperation. Now, if you look at the location of Morocco, it is at a gateway to both Africa and Europe, and this enhances India's market access as well. This initiative not just strengthens Morocco's defense capacity but also contributes to stability in the North African region. Regional security in short, right? Now, if we talk about this particular manufacturing plant, defense facility that is being built by India and Morocco, what is the primary purpose of this new facility? The primary purpose of this new facility is to produce wheeled armored platform, okay, or WHAP. What is it? It is basically a next generation combat vehicle which is being jointly designed by Tata and India's DRDO, that is the Defense Research Development Organization. So it basically looks something like this. It is an indigenously developed modular platform and it is known for its advanced protection, superior mobility and operational versatility because it can adapt to various combat roles during the war or any skirmishes, right? It has a command post, then it will also, the manufacturing plant, if we are talking about it, it will have a command post, then motor carrier, okay, fighting vehicles, then ambulances, etc. And this particular vehicle, this has been equipped with remote weapon stations and it has anti-tank guided missiles as well. Now, ATGM or anti-tank guided missile, you can understand from the words itself that it is basically a guided missile which is designed to hit and destroy heavily armored military vehicles or tanks, right? So this is going to be a strategic step for India. It not only expands India's defense diplomacy in Africa as mentioned earlier, it also diversifies defense exports. It reduces dependence on traditional buyers. Further, it strengthens our maritime security cooperation in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic zones. Plus, it counters China's growing influence in African defense markets. Now, from prelims point of view, the location of Morocco becomes important since this was in news. So, Morocco is of course in the West North African region across the Strait of Gibraltar from Spain. As you can see in this map, okay, Strait of Gibraltar in Spain and just across that region. And if we talk about the bordering countries, now if you talk about the borders of Morocco, it is surrounded by Algeria in the east, right? Western Sahara in the south, and it is open to the Atlantic Ocean in the west and the Mediterranean Sea in the north. Okay, and it is the only African country which has coastlines on both the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. Very important to note. If we talk about the physical geography, it has the Atlas Mountains. Okay, the highest point in the country is Mount Topkal and the longest river is Dra River. Moving to the next topic, Ladakh protests. So, of course, the protests in Ladakh have intensified with the demands for statehood and inclusion under the 6th schedule of the Constitution. So, we all know that in 2019, after the abrogation of the Article 370, Jammu and Kashmir was divided and it was bifurcated into Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory and Ladakh Union Territory, right? This was Jammu and Kashmir and this portion was Ladakh. Now after that things have changed, but at the same time the protests that are going on in Ladakh since a few years now have intensified because for several years the residents of Ladakh, they have pressed the central government for stronger constitutional safeguards. For example, they want to have local control over land and jobs, then greater political representation, etc. Basically, the protesters are demanding for full statehood of Ladakh. They also want the extension of the constitutional protections under the 6th schedule, okay, because under 6th schedule we all know that it grants certain autonomous powers to the tribal areas, right? Then they want separate Lok Sabha seats for Ladakh, Leh and Kargil areas. Also, they want job reservations for the local communities, and these demands have been voiced through various local bodies, for instance the Kargil Democratic Alliance, etc. And recently, of course, there were clashes between the protesters and the security personnel, and it got escalated, and a number of people, 4 civilians were dead also after this. Curfew and there were certain prohibitory orders also, and they were imposed in Ladakh and the parts of Kargil. Now basically right now this entire protest is being carried out by younger activists and student groups, and they are also referred to as Gen Z participants. And climate activist and educator Sonam Wangchuk, we all know about him. He also began a hunger strike in early September, and we all know that he has been a prominent figure who is associated with this movement's demands for the 6th schedule protection especially and the statehood. And so as we can see that the protesters' core demands, it basically centers around 4 items. Okay, one is the inclusion within the 6th schedule. Okay, next is a separate parliamentary representation for Leh and Kargil, right? Third is a job and land safeguards for residents. And finally, we can see that full statehood for Ladakh. It's important to note that over 90% of people in Ladakh, they are from the scheduled tribes. So, of course, they want protection of their tribal identity and their rights under the 6th schedule. Okay, and separate public service commission for Ladakh is also important for employment. And if we talk about the representation, currently just 1 Lok Sabha seat is there. So, there's a demand for 2 Lok Sabha seats, one from Leh and another from Kargil, and 1 Rajya Sabha seat as well. So, of course, they don't want to lose the autonomy, and that is why these are the basically drivers of the protest, because right now the Hill Development Councils, they are like subordinate to the Lieutenant Governor, the same issue that was going on in Delhi, and the Chief Minister was like a bit like bound by the decisions of the Lieutenant Governor. Also, if we talk about the environmental situation in Ladakh, so there's a lot of stress because there's fear of mining and industrialization in fragile valleys. We all know what has happened in Uttarakhand, right? So what are the keywords that you can mention while writing your mains answer? The first one is loss of autonomy. This is one of the key drivers of the protest. Okay, as mentioned earlier. Then there is environmental stress. Okay. Then border security, because Chinese presence along the line of actual control is a concern, right? So environmental security, environmental stress, and then border security. This is another point. Also, there's loss of grazing land for the Pashmina shepherds. Okay, and we all know that the LA8 passes through the Pangong Tso, and there have been skirmishes in the past as well. Next is the democratic deficit. Very, very important. Okay, so without a legislature, Ladakh Union Territory right now, it basically curtails the local governance participation. Then another reason behind the protest is job shortage, because in Ladakh 26.5% of the graduates are unemployed. Okay, this is the 2nd highest in India. Now let's talk about the 6th schedule of India. Okay, this particular schedule of the constitution provides measures of autonomy and self-governance to the scheduled tribes in certain states of India. Now, if you talk about the background of this 6th schedule, so basically during the British Raj, the frontier regions of the Assam province, which were like populated by tribal communities, were designated as excluded areas or partially excluded areas. Okay, this was during the British Raj. The northeast frontier tracts, which is like the present day Arunachal Pradesh, then the Naga Hills district, which is the present day Nagaland, then the Lushai Hills district, which is the present day Mizoram, they were all designated as excluded areas. At the same time, the Khasi and the Jaintia Hills region, which is in the present day Meghalaya, they were also designated as partially excluded area. So now this exclusion, this worked in both directions. Firstly, the tribes were excluded from the legislature and the governance mechanisms of the Assam province, And at the same time, the laws created for the province were excluded from application to these tribal areas. They were not applicable to these tribal areas. So basically the tribes, they governed themselves via their traditional systems, except for being asked to participate in the imperial interests such as taxation and road building, etc. Now during the formulation of our constitution, right, the sixth schedule was devised to continue these modes of governance, because the constitution provided the tribes the autonomy, and it also allowed them to continue their own traditional systems of self-governance. The tribal areas in other parts of India were covered by a parallel fifth schedule, very important to note, which had somewhere like weaker forms of autonomy, but under the sixth schedule it has higher forms of local governance and autonomy. Okay. Now the sixth schedule of the Indian Constitution, it deals with the administration of the tribal areas in right now 4 northeastern states. Okay. Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Tripura. And this is according to Article 244. Now, what are the provisions of this? If we talk about the autonomous district councils, then the sixth schedule of the constitution, it allows for the formation of autonomous administrative divisions which have been given the autonomy within their respective states. Now, the state governor is authorized to increase or decrease the areas or even change the name of the autonomous districts. The executive powers of the state, it extend to the sixth schedule areas with respect to their administration, and the acts of the parliament or the state legislature, they do not, very important to note that they do not apply to these autonomous districts. So the acts of the parliament or the state legislatures, they do not apply to these autonomous districts and autonomous regions, or apply with the specified modification and exceptions, if any. Even if they are applied, they are applied with specified modifications and exceptions as per their own decision. So basically these autonomous councils, they have been granted wide civil and criminal judicial powers, such as establishing village courts. They can do whatever they want, and the jurisdiction of these councils is under the jurisdiction of the concerned High Court. If we talk about the district councils in these areas, okay, if we talk about the composition, then they have up to 30 members, and out of these 30 members, 4 are nominated, rest are elected. Now, if we talk about the regional councils here in this region, okay, they have they have multiple tribal groups within the districts. Now, talking about legislative powers, of course, land, forests, except the reserved ones, inheritance, local trade and money lending, these are all by non-tribal areas, these are not allowed, and even governor's assent is required for this. Okay. If we talk about revenue and taxation, then they can collect revenue, impose taxes and issue licenses for minerals. Council courts for disputes, of course, the administration of justice is completely different over there, because the High Court retains the jurisdiction for serious cases. But if there are certain cases related to the scheduled tribe, then in that case the council courts deal with it, and the maximum imprisonment they can impose is of 5 years. We talk about developmental powers like schools, dispensaries, markets, roads, fisheries, transport, it is all handled by them. And the acts of parliament and state legislatures, they may apply with modifications and specifications as mentioned earlier, and the governor can reorganize districts and appoint commissions for investigations also. Okay. Now, Ladakh is also asking for these protections under the 6th schedule, but there are certain other things like the national security priority, and this has been the response from the end of the government, because Ladakh's border with China makes direct central control crucial for military, logistics and infrastructure. That is the main reason why central government is not allowing for complete statehood or putting it under 6th schedule. Then the center argues that the union territory status fulfill local aspirations. Okay. Now, new demands are just an escalation of the thing, because after the abrogation of Article 370, a lot of local aspirations have been fulfilled according to the central government. And Of course, the local democratic aspirations, they clash with the central strategic imperatives, because from the security point of view, from the sovereignty point of view, the central government wants to have its direct control over Ladakh, and the local democratic aspirations, they are now clashing with the center's strategic point of view. Now, so what is the way forward? Of course, we can empower the hill councils and strengthen the Leh and Kargil autonomous hill development councils with more powers and larger budgets. Secondly, what we can do is we can prepare, or we can pass special laws to protect the land ownership and reserve jobs for locals, and in this way the sixth schedule goals can be achieved without full autonomy also. Then we also need to resume talks with the Leh apex body and the Kargil Democratic Alliance, and for trust building, of course, because we need to focus on balancing local aspirations with the strategic needs. In conclusion, we can say that the Ladakh protests, they reflect, of course, the aspirations of the people for autonomy, representation and tribal safeguards. So constructive dialogue is important, institutional reforms important, trust building is important. They are essential to maintain peace, stability and strategic interests in this sensitive border region. The next topic is gene therapy for Huntington's disease. So recently the researchers at University College London, they demonstrated that gene therapy can slow down the progression of Huntington's disease by nearly 75% over 3 years, and this is the first therapy that has been proven to alter the course of the disease, because it is not just relieving its symptoms but literally slowing down the progression of the disease, literally curing it. So in the first place, we need to know what is Huntington's disease. Huntington is a rare genetic neurodegenerative disorder, and it is caused by the mutation of HTT gene, okay, which is the Huntington gene. And due to this mutation, there is a production of an abnormal Huntington protein. What is mutation? We have studied this in school also. Mutation is a permanent alteration in the DNA sequence of an organism. It could be a virus or any other genetic material. And these changes can arise from errors during the replication of the DNA, right? And it can be caused by external factors like UV radiation and chemicals, etc. Now, when there is an alteration in the sequence of the DNA, then what happens is an abnormality might occur. For instance, here there is a production of an abnormal protein called the Huntington protein, and this creates the mess. So what happens is there is a repetition of CAG. We have read in bio that cytosine, adenine, thymine, guanine, right? So these are the bases, DNA bases. Now if there is a expansion of cytosine, adenine and guanine, CAG, in the HTT gene, it leads to what? Rapid expansion. So basically abnormal large number of CAG repeats in the HTT gene. And then what happens is this expansion results in the long stretch of glutamine at the beginning of the Huntington protein. Not important, just you have to know that this expansion causes the Huntington protein to misfold and form aggregates, okay, aggregates within the neurons. As we all know that neurons are what? Nerve cells, and they are basically the structural and functional units of the nervous system. You have read in bio, it looks something like this, right? And it has a number of structure, like within this is a cell body, then it has axon, then basically we can draw it here. Right, this you have read in your school. Neuron, this is a cell body, right? Then there's a cell membrane, then there's axon, these are the dendrites. So these are the cells, nerve cells. These are responsible for sending and receiving electrical and chemical signals throughout our body. And these specialized cells, they basically transmit information between the brain, spinal cord and the muscles. So they send the information and enables everything from sensory perception and thought to movement, right? So when there is an accumulation of this HTT gene within the or the CAG, we can say, within the neurons, the aggregation of this particular protein that is misfolded and of course inclusion bodies aggregates within these neurons, this interferes with the normal cellular process. Motor symptoms of a body gets affected. For instance, there is muscle rigidity, then there are jerky movements, okay, then deficits in thought processing, organization, memory, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder. These are all the symptoms and these are the issues that arise in Huntington's disease. There is a progressive damage to specific brain regions like the basal ganglia and the cortex. So mental disorders, of course, cognitive decline and motor dysfunction, loss of coordination, difficulty in speech and swallowing. It's important to note that if we talk about the inheritance, then it is an autosomal dominant disease, because 50% chance of inheritance is there if one parent has the mutation of HTT gene. So of course there will be severe disability and premature death within the 15 to 20 years of onset of this disease of any being. Now if we talk about the existing treatments, so there was only symptom management. For instance, antipsychotics, antidepressants for mental symptoms, then physiotherapy and supportive care for motor function. So these were the approaches, but the limitation was that it could not stop or slow down the progression of the disease. But now the new gene therapy, it has been referred to as AMT-130. In this what happens is a single surgical injection is injected into the targeted brain areas, okay, and this uses a harmless virus also as a vector, as a carrier of this thing, and it delivers a genetic payload that silences the mutant HTT gene. Basically the gene which is getting mutated, it is silenced using genetic engineering, you can say. It reduces the toxic protein synthesis, and this, as a result, what happens is the disease progression slows down by 75% over 3 years. And some patients have showed stabilization of brain volume and function also. It is very significant because this is the first such therapy to modify disease progression rather than just manage symptoms. And this paves the way for gene-based cures for other neurodegenerative diseases. For instance, Alzheimer, then Parkinson's disease, etc. Moving to the next topic, the new definition of pandemic emergency. So recently 194 member states of the World Health Organization, they have amended the International Health Regulations, or IHR. Okay, this happened in June 2024 and now it came into force in September 2025, and this has introduced a new legal category called pandemic emergency. Now what is this, what are these international health regulations in the first place that were amended? So the IHR, or the International Health Regulations, these are a legally binding framework. Very important to note that legally binding framework which has been established by the World Health Organization to ensure global public health security. Basically the objective is to protect against and control and prevent and provide a public health response to international spread of disease. This was adopted in the year 1969 and the focus was on 6 diseases at that point of time. They were cholera, plague, yellow fever, smallpox, relapsing fever and typhus. Then in the year 2005, the IHR were revised, okay, to address a broader range of public health threats. And then after that a lot of changes have happened in this. Now if you talk about the key components of IHR as per the 2005 amendments, then the core capacities of course need to be built. Surveillance, countries must develop and maintain capabilities to detect, assess, respond and report to public health events. Establish national public health emergency response plans. Then of course if you talk about the notification and reporting, then timely reporting is important because countries must report public health emergencies of international concerns, which is also referred to as PHEIC. So countries must report these PHEIC or public health emergencies of international concern to World Health Organization within 24 hours. This is very important. And then of course there has to be a continuous exchange of information with the World Health Organization regarding public health risks and response measures. Also there have been certain provisions regarding the containment that is of the various like spread of diseases at points of entry like airports, ports, ground crossings, etc. Quarantine, isolation, these are there. And finally coordination that is working with the World Health Organization and other countries to manage the health risks and technical support, so that different countries and different bodies, they receive assistance from the World Health Organization for capacity building and emergency response. Now in the recent amendment of the IHR, okay, a new category called the pandemic emergency has been introduced. And what is it? It is basically defined as a public health emergency of international concern caused by a communicable disease. And this particular disease has to be something that has high risk of having wide geographical spread to within multiple states, right? It is exceeding, and it has high risk of exceeding the capacity of health systems to respond. Then it is something that is very serious or that can cause economic and social disruption, including disruption to international traffic and trade. So this is another criteria. And the last one is that it requires rapid, equitable and enhanced coordinated international action with whole of government and whole of society approaches, not in silos. So of course these are the things that define a pandemic emergency. Okay. Now in this particular amendment, with the introduction of pandemic emergency, it has created a tiered alert system, okay, where of course the pandemic emergency would be the highest alert, and that can trigger a more urgent and coordinated international response for the most severe threats. Of course the amendments, they legally enshrine the principles of equity, and it also obligates the World Health Organization and the member states to ensure free access to health products like vaccines, then diagnostics and treatments during such health emergencies. Okay. Now it has also been committed that a new mechanism will be established to help developing countries in building and maintaining the core public health capacities that are required by the IHR. Okay. And a committee of member states will also be created to facilitate the effective implementation of the regulations. It is very significant because if we talk about the new approach, it has clearly defined the pandemic emergency because it aims to prevent delays in declaration and response, as we have seen during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Then it also focuses on equitable access to health products and establish a financial mechanism so that there are no disparities between the developed and the developing nations that we have seen. Of course, there is a need for global collaboration and to strengthen it, build resilience, and of course the adoption of the IHR amendments, it will strengthen global pandemic preparedness. Also it will effectively solve the issues, the gap between the developing countries and the developed countries in terms of vaccine sharing. Okay. And but of course it needs effective implementation, okay, which needs political will and financial investment. So strong commitment and resources will ensure that these obligations, they translate into tangible protection against the such threats, future threats related to health. The next topic is the WASSENAAR arrangement. Recently there have been calls to reform the WASSENAAR arrangement because it struggles to regulate the digital surveillance technologies and the cloud services and the SaaS models nowadays. We'll of course discuss in detail. So in the first place, what is WASSENAAR arrangement? WASSENAAR arrangement is a multilateral export control regime. Very important to note. When you will be defining it, you have to write this: multilateral export control regime. Okay. Now, what is a multilateral export control regime? Basically, it is an informal group of like-minded supplier countries that seek to contribute to the non-proliferation or not the spreading of weapons of mass destructions, advanced conventional weapons through national implementation of guidelines and also control lists for exports. Okay. Now there are 4 such regimes. One is the WASSENAAR arrangement that we have discussed. Second is the NSG, that is the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Third is the Australian Group, and fourth is the MTCR, that is a Missile Technology Control Regime. These are the 4 multilateral export control regime. WASSENAAR tries to control exports of conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies. Okay, it is also known as WASSENAAR arrangement because it was established in 1996 in Wassenaar, Netherlands, as a successor of the Cold War era control regime, that is the Controlling Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Export Control, or COCOM. COCOM, that is the Cold War era Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Export Controls. Okay, so after the Cold War, of course, it wanted to control the spread or the proliferation of the various weapons, conventional arms and technologies. So for that reason, in 1996, WASSENAAR arrangement was brought into place, and it restricted certain goods to the Eastern Bloc as well. It was basically established to contribute to regional and international security and stability by promoting transparency and greater responsibility among the participating states. Okay. It also coordinates their national policies and ensures that certain technologies are not transferred or otherwise diverted to countries that undermine these goals. So this is basically the WASSENAAR arrangement. In prelims, they can put certain confusing words like treaty, etc. Please note that WASSENAAR arrangement is not a treaty. Okay, it is voluntary. It is not legally binding. And it is, of course, a consensus-based coordination mechanism. Alright. And as mentioned earlier, it was set up to promote transparency and responsibility in technology transfers, especially in terms of related to weapons. Okay. The headquarters are in Vienna, Austria. Not Netherlands, please note. Vienna, Austria, and it has a small permanent secretariat as well. There are around 42 participating nations, and the major powers are US, UK, France, Germany, Russia and Japan. And of course, India joined in the year 2017, and so India, South Africa, Mexico, Korea, these are also members of this particular WASSENAAR arrangement, and these are all emerging economies. So basically the WASSENAAR arrangement, it prevents the destabilization and it prevents the build-up of arms and sensitive technologies. It also ensures that the items are not diverted to terrorists, rogue regimes or various proliferation networks, and it also makes sure that there is a balance between security concerns and legitimate trade or innovation. Okay, so what are the key features of this WASSENAAR arrangement? First is control list. So it has a list, dual use goods and technologies and munition lists, and the proliferation spread or trade is restricted. Okay, so this is the control list. Then of course on information exchange, because members must report transfers and denials of various technologies related to arms and ammunitions, and this has to be done every 6 months. Then decision making is done by consensus, and this ensures that there is national discretion. And since 2013, it has also included the software thing, okay, intrusion software and cyber surveillance tools into its scope, because nowadays it is not just the physical transfer of weapons, but it has spread in the digital world as well. Now, India joined the WASSENAAR arrangement in 2017, and this has boosted its entry into the global non-proliferation regime. Okay. Now, the issue is that the WASSENAAR arrangement, it was built in the 1990s, as mentioned earlier, to control the physical exports of arms and dual-use goods. But this has not adapted to the digital era, because right now modern technologies like the various cloud services, artificial intelligence, cyber surveillance tools, SaaS, these all bypass its framework, and this creates a gray area or loophole, you can say, and that is why a lot of member countries, they even the other countries, they can participate in these kind of digital proliferation of arms and ammunitions and other threats, and they won't be accountable in that manner. So that is why there have been calls to completely reform the WASSENAAR arrangement as per this 2025. And although the scope was enhanced in 2013, but it was not enough, and that is why there have been calls to reform the entire process. Moving to the next topic, Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve, okay, included in UNESCO's World Network of Biosphere Reserve. So India's Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve has been included in UNESCO's WNBR or World Network of Biosphere Reserves at the 37th session, and this Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve of India is in Himachal Pradesh. Firstly, what are biosphere reserves? So biosphere reserves are areas that are designated by the UNESCO, and the aim is to promote the conservation of biodiversity, sustainable development that will be not just for this generation, but that will be for the upcoming generations as well, and scientific research. Okay, so these are the three purposes. So promotion and the conservation of biodiversity, sustainable development and scientific research, and for this particular like purposes or reasons, the biosphere reserves are designated by the UNESCO, and it is managed under the UNESCO's Man and Biodiversity Program. Okay, it is also known as MAB, Man and Biodiversity Program. It basically consists of three zones if we talk about the biosphere reserves. Okay, one is the core zone, then it is followed by the buffer zone, and finally this is the transition zone. Okay, in the core zone, of course, is strict protection of the ecosystems. Buffer zone is the place where people live and work in harmony with nature, and the transition zone is for the sustainable activities. Okay, so biosphere reserves, they basically try to balance the economic and social development and maintain the associated cultural values also, along with the preservation of nature. Now, there are a lot of biosphere reserves in India, around more than 750 biosphere reserves in across various countries, around 136 countries, and India has around 18 internationally recognized biosphere reserves, and the Nilgiri Reserve is the first one. Okay, now if you talk about the biosphere reserves in India that are listed in the UNESCO's WNBR or World Network of Biosphere Reserves, then it is Nilgiri. This was the first one. It was enlisted in the year 2000. Okay, this is spread across Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Karnataka. Then in 2001, Sundarbans is the second one. 2001, it became like it was listed in the WNBR thing. Then came the Gulf of Mannar. This you have to memorize. Gulf of Mannar is in Tamil Nadu. It is followed by Nanda Devi. Nanda Devi is in Uttarakhand. Then Nokrek. This is in Meghalaya. Then Simlipal is in Odisha. Simlipal. Then we have Panchmadi. This is in Madhya Pradesh. Achanakmar Amar Kantak. This is in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Achanakmar and Amarkantak. Okay, then Great Nicobar, of course, this is in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Then Agastya Malai is in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Agastya Malai. Then Kanchenjunga. Panna. Kanchenjunga is in Sikkim. Okay. Panna is in Madhya Pradesh. And finally, cold desert. The recent one, this is in Himachal Pradesh. Very important to note. Now, if we talk about the Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve, it is a high altitude biosphere reserve in Himachal Pradesh and it has an area of around 777 square kilometers, 7770 square kilometers, and it is in the Trans-Himalayan region. Very important to note. It is in the Trans-Himalayan region. Trans-Himalayan region means it is a mountain range in China, India, Nepal, and basically it is located north of the main Himalayas and it forms a boundary with the Tibetan plateau. Okay, so that is referred to as the Trans-Himalayan region. So it has become India's first high altitude cold desert site in the global network. Fine. And if we talk about this particular Trans-Himalayan region, we were discussing, it basically integrates the Pin Valley National Park, Kibber Wildlife Sanctuary and Chandratal wetland and the surrounding areas. Okay. As usual, it has been also zoned into core, buffer and transition areas to balance the conservation and the community livelihoods. If we talk about the exact location of the Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve in Himachal Pradesh, this is in Lahore Spiti district and it has an altitude of 3,300 to 6,600 meters range, and terrain, of course, there are like plateaus, glacial valleys, alpine lakes and high altitude desert ecosystems. Okay, it has a lot of herbs, shrubs, trees, around like endemics also. Then there are certain traditions like the Suarikpa healing tradition by the tribals of that area. There are some flagship species over here like the snow leopard, Himalayan wolf, Tibetan antelope and Himalayan ibex. Okay, and India has of course 18 biosphere reserves, of which 13 are in WNBR. Okay, that is the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, and out of 18, 13 are there. Okay, and globally, as mentioned earlier, right now it has 785 sites in 142 countries, and 26 new reserves have been added in 2025, which is the highest in 20 years. So UNESCO has added around 26 new reserves. Right now, this particular addition is a significant thing for India because India's role in the biodiversity conservation gets enhanced and sustainable modern ecosystem management also gets a boost. Also, it serves as a living laboratory for international scientific collaboration. So, it is quite significant. The next topic is 2 new Ramsar sites in Bihar. So recently 2 new sites in Bihar were added to the Ramsar list. Okay, the first one is the Gokul Jalashay and the second one is the Udaipur Jheel. Firstly, let's understand that the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands of International Importance is an international treaty. Very important to note. International treaty. Okay, that was formed for the conservation and sustainable use of Ramsar sites or wetlands. It is also known as Convention on Wetlands and it is named after the city of Ramsar, which is in Iran, and the convention was signed in 1971. Now, under this Ramsar Convention, Ramsar sites are designated. It is basically, any Ramsar site is a wetland site which is designated to be of international importance under the Ramsar Convention, and it is of course under the auspices of the UNESCO, and it came into force. If we talk about the Ramsar site and the Ramsar Convention, it came into force in 1975. It was ratified by a number of nations as mentioned earlier. Now, as of if we talk about 2025, there are around 2544 Ramsar sites around the world. So we are basically protecting a lot of area, and in this 172 countries are participating. Now, what is the criteria for selecting a wetland as a Ramsar site? There are basically 9 criteria. Okay. Just remember the keywords here. For instance, the first criteria is that it contains a representative, rare or unique example of natural or near natural wetland type. It supports, then the second one is that it supports vulnerable, endangered or critically endangered species, right? Then it supports populations of plants or animal species that are important for maintaining the biological diversity of a particular region. Then it supports plant or animal species that are critical stage in their life cycles. It supports more than 20,000 water birds, 20,000 or more than that. This is the fifth criteria. Sixth is it supports 1% of individuals in a population of one species or subspecies of water bird. 1% of individuals in a population of one species. Seventh is that it supports a significant proportion of indigenous fish, species or families, then species interactions, etc. Basically, it contributes to the global biological diversity. Eighth one is that it is an important source of food for fishes, spawning industries, then like spawning grounds, and then nurseries, migration path for various fishes, etc. And finally, it regularly supports 1% of the individuals in a population of one species or subspecies of wetland dependent non-avian animal species. Not avian, non-avian animal species. Very simple, non-avian means something which is like species that are not related to birds. Now, what is the need of like protecting these wetlands? Basically, wetlands are critical ecosystems for what? For biodiversity, for water security, flood control and livelihoods. And that is why it is important to protect them and conserve them. Okay. So, in this particular framework, the Ramsar Convention and then Ramsar sites, it provides a framework for national action as well as international cooperation. And it also identifies wetlands that are very vital for rare ecosystems, migratory birds, endangered species as mentioned earlier, fishes and hydrological balance. If we talk about India, then India has around 93 wetlands across 13.6 lakh hectares. Very important to note. Okay, so in 2012 there were around 26 and this has jumped to 93 by 2025. So 51 sites have been added since 2020. Okay, so India is third in the world right now after UK and Mexico, because UK has around 176 Ramsar sites and Mexico has 144, and now India has 93, and in Asia, India is number one in the number of Ramsar sites. If we talk about Bihar, Bihar right now has 5 new Ramsar sites, 2 Gokul Jalashay, Udaipur Jheel, these have been added. Apart from that, there are other Ramsar sites like Kabar Jheel. Okay, it is also referred to as Kabar Tal. This is in Begusarai. Then there is Nagi, and finally there is Nakti Bird Sanctuary. Nakti Bird Sanctuary. This is also a Ramsar site in Bihar. So in total there are 5 Ramsar sites in Bihar right now. Moving to the next topic, government guidelines for EV charging stations. So recently the center has issued fresh guidelines for setting up of around 72,000 public EV charging stations across India. It has also allotted around 2,000 crore support under the PM E-Drive scheme for this. Now let's talk about PM E-Drive scheme. Okay, it is basically a central government scheme. Important to note that it is a central government scheme. The aim of this particular scheme is to provide demand incentives and grants for boosting electric mobility across multiple vehicle categories. It is implemented by the Ministry of Heavy Industries. Very important to note. Ministry of Heavy Industries. Okay. And the objective is to promote adoption of electric vehicles for public and commercial transportation. It also wants to reduce carbon emissions in transport sector and promote sustainable mobility. And finally, it wants to support creation of essential EV infrastructure such as charging stations across the country. Now, there are a lot of targets. For instance, for e-2-wheelers, e-3-wheelers, e-buses, e-ambulances and e-trucks. It also emphasizes upon the commercial vehicles and public transport solutions, and it enhances EV testing capabilities and upgradation of the institutions that are under the ministry. Now, if we talk about the features of PM E-Drive scheme, then it provides subsidies. Okay, subsidies for what? For emerging EV categories like the ambulances, the trucks, the scooties, the bikes, etc. It also funds for setting up of public charging stations and testing agencies. Okay, so it wants to, the main implementation would be between 2024 and 26, that is already ongoing. Okay, and then there is electric mobility promotion scheme. This has also been integrated into the PM E-Drive scheme only. Now, if we talk about the eligibility, then of course public transportation systems, commercial vehicles, these are eligible. Private and corporate owned registered e-vehicles are also eligible under this. E-ambulances, they are also eligible, but no incentives for EVs would be provided that are purchased by government departments. Very important to note, this is to avoid fund transfer within the government accounts, because from one department to the other department, that would be the case if incentives are provided to the EV purchases by the government itself, government departments itself. So that is a restriction. Now, if we talk about the recent guidelines that have been shared by the central government for EV charging stations. It is basically a guideline, a policy framework, okay, which has been unveiled by the Ministry of Heavy Industries, and basically the aim is to accelerate the installation of public EV charging infrastructure across India, because we all know that there is a huge promotion of EV vehicles in India, e-vehicles in India, but there are no adequate number of charging stations across the cities. So that is a bottleneck, a hindrance which this particular policy wants to overcome. And the aim is to expand India's EV ecosystem by building an accessible and affordable charging network. This will of course reduce range anxiety, because of course there is a anxiety for like EV vehicle owners, because they can't travel far away because of lack of charging stations. It will also promote clean mobility, and it will align with India's net zero targets by 2070, right? And then of course, if we talk about the key features of this particular policy or guideline, then 100% subsidy would be provided for charging stations in government premises, schools, hospitals, residential colonies with free public access. 80% subsidy will be given on infrastructure and 70% on charging equipment at high traffic sites like airports, metro hubs, toll plazas, etc. 80% subsidy for shopping malls, highway outlets and battery swapping stations. If we talk about the priority stations, then cities with population which have more than 1 million people population, the state capitals, smart cities, metro linked towns, these will have priorities. Then public transport hubs like railway stations, airports, bus depots, fuel stations, these will be the priority locations. And of course, there will be nodal agencies to aggregate the demand, identify the sites and submit proposals, and there will be a dedicated portal for this, which the government is already preparing. And subsidies will be released in 2 phases, and it will be tied to compliance and performance benchmarks, that if you comply with the guidelines, then only the second tranche or the second phase of subsidies will be released. And it of course aims to cover a national pan-India basis thing. So the coverage would be pan-India, okay, because 72,000 charging stations means of course there will be huge expansion of the EV charging stations and the infrastructure of the EV ecosystem. The next topic is Dugong Conservation Reserve. Okay, so recently the IUCN World Conservation Congress adopted a resolution, and it has recognized India's first Dugong Conservation Reserve in PALK Bay, Tamil Nadu. Very important to note. And this is now a global model for marine biodiversity conservation. So it is of course India's first Dugong Conservation Reserve, and it was notified in September 2022 under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Now in 2025 it has been recognized by the IUCN, and of course it's a very big step for marine biodiversity. Now if we talk about this particular conservation reserve, it is spread across 448 square kilometer across the Thanjavur and Pudukottai districts of Tamil Nadu, which is around the northern PALK Bay area. Okay, and it protects the dugong, the sea cows, which is listed as vulnerable in the IUCN red list. Okay, now sea grass beds here also support commercial fish, crabs, shrimps, etc. So it would be a win-win situation. Now if we talk about dugong is a mammal. It is a herbivorous mammal which is commonly called sea cow, and it is the only herbivorous marine mammal in existence right now. Okay, and it is distributed across tropical and subtropical seagrass meadows of Indian Ocean and the Western Pacific. And India, if we talk about India, then the major populations of dugong is in PALK Bay, the Gulf of Mannar, Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Gulf of Kutch. Okay, so these are very important from the like conservation and biodiversity point of view, okay, and they consume around 30 to 40 kgs of seagrass daily, and they have a lifespan of around 70 years, but they have a very slow reproductive rate, and they have a size of around 3.5 meter long, and they weigh more than 300 kgs, okay. Dugong have huge ecological importance because they help in maintaining the seagrass bed as the world's only strictly herbivorous marine mammal. Dugongs, they basically graze on seagrass, and they prevent the overgrowth of seagrass and they promote new growth. This grazing helps in maintaining the health and biodiversity of seagrass meadows. Also, healthy seagrass meadows act as significant carbon sinks and they store large amounts of carbon dioxide. So, by maintaining these meadows, dugongs indirectly contribute to climate change mitigation. Okay, seagrass beds are crucial habitats for many marine animals and support coastal fisheries. So they are also important. So this like dugongs, they help in sustaining these vital ecosystems. Dugongs also play a role in the dispersal and germination of seagrass seeds, and the health of dugong populations can serve as an indicator of the overall health of coastal marine environments and seagrass habitats. So ecological importance of dugong is huge, and in short, they are vital for coastal protection, they are vital for climate mitigation through carbon sequestration, and they support fish populations. So in prelims, a number of questions appear where like the importance of dugong can be listed, which are indirectly correct. For instance, climate change mitigation. Do dugongs like play a role in that? Yes, they do, by maintaining the seagrass bed. So that would be correct. Moving to the next topic, 2G ethanol export allowed. Okay, so recently India allowed the export of 2G ethanol with mandatory export licenses and feedstock certificates. In the first place, what is 2G ethanol? 2G or second generation ethanol is an advanced biofuel. Okay, it is an advanced biofuel which is made from non-food biomass such as agricultural residues, forestry waste, woody biomass, algae and municipal solid waste. Okay, unlike the 1G, that is the first generation ethanol, which is made from edible crops like sugarcane and maize, 2G ethanol, this particular biofuel, it uses waste materials in order to ensure that there is food security and sustainable fuel use. We all know that we are moving from petrol, diesel and other these kind of fuels to biofuels to cut emissions, okay, for a sustainable, cleaner environment and all, and that is why this topic is in news. If we discuss a bit in detail about biofuels, biofuels are any hydrocarbon fuel that is produced from an organic matter. Very important to note. Organic matter. So here 1G we had discussed about food crops, right? But this will threaten the food security, and that's why came the 2G. Second generation ethanol, this is produced from waste, organic waste only, agricultural waste, then municipal solid waste, etc. Okay. Now, these can be used to replace or can be used in addition to diesel, petrol or other fossil fuels for transport, portable and other applications to generate heat, electricity, etc. Right? And as mentioned earlier, it is very important to shift to biofuel because it cuts down the emission of greenhouse gases from the fossil fuels. And then there is something called 3G or third generation biofuels. Okay, these are produced mainly from microorganisms like algae. Very important to note, okay, because microorganisms like algae, they can be grown using land and water unsuitable for food production. So again, here also we are moving one step ahead because this reduces the strain on already depleted waste water resources and all. Okay, so that is there. Then the fourth generation biofuels are there, 4G biofuels. What are these? In these what happens? Crops that are genetically engineered, okay, they are used, okay, and the crops are then converted into fuel using second generation techniques. So if we talk about the various types of biofuels, there bioethanol, then biodiesel, biogas, biobutanol, biohydrogen, etc. Here we are talking about second generation ethanol. Okay, so the government has allowed the exports of second generation ethanol, and we'll discuss about it. Please note that when we are talking about 2G ethanol, okay, which is produced from what? From waste resources, as mentioned earlier, non-food, agricultural residues, waste and all. They are very sustainable in nature because they use agricultural and forestry residues, okay, and this reduces the stubble burning issue because that leads to pollution in the northern states like Punjab and Haryana. We all know that. Delhi also. Now, whether the 2G ethanol is a carbon free fuel? No, it is not a carbon free fuel. It is a low carbon fuel, okay, because it reduces the emission of greenhouse gases from 85 to 100% as a range, but not completely. It also prevents the diversion of food crops. It eases food versus fuel debate, and it can use around 62 metric million tons of municipal waste in India annually. So this is scalable, and this will also reduce the spread of waste, municipal waste across the cities, right? And it is also supported by India's E20 blending target, because we right now we are blending that is ethanol with our fuel, okay? So it has a lot of applications like blending with petrol, potential for green aviation fuel, that is aviation biofuel, industrial solvents in pharma, then in chemicals and in beverage sectors, and then finally environmental management, because it helps in curbing stubble burning and waste accumulation across the cities. So it is a welcome step, and India has finally allowed the export of 2G ethanol, but of course there will be export licenses which would be mandatory for this, and certificates of feedstock also from where the ethanol is being produced. So that certificate has to be there. Moving to the final topic, AGNI-P missile or AGNI-PRIME missile test fired by India. So India has successfully test fired the AGNI-PRIME intermediate range missile. Okay, and it is a first of its kind launch that enhances mobility and stealth and strategic deterrence. We'll definitely discuss about the AGNI-PRIME missile in detail, but let's understand about the entire AGNI series first. So the AGNI missile is a family of medium to intercontinental range ballistic missiles. Okay, intercontinental means it is a missile which has a range greater than 5500 kilometers. So it is basically a missile that can travel from one continent to the other. That is why intercontinental. Okay, and these AGNI missiles, ballistic missiles, have been developed by India, and it is named after one of the 5 elements of nature. They are long range, nuclear weapons capable, and they are surface to surface ballistic missiles. Now, what is a ballistic missile? A ballistic missile is a missile that follows the projectile motion. Okay, projectile motion in which an object that is launched into the air moves under the influence of gravity, like this. Okay, with the air resistance neglected. So that is a ballistic missile. It basically follows a ballistic trajectory, that is a projectile trajectory, and it is powered only during a relatively brief initial period, and most of the flight is unpowered. Okay. Now, the first missile of the AGNI series, that is AGNI-1, was developed under the IGMDP, that is the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, and AGNI-1 was tested in 1989. Now, after the success of AGNI-1, the AGNI missile program was separated from the guided missile development program upon realization that it is very important strategically. Okay, and then it was designated as a special program in India's defense budget, and then adequate funds were provided for the subsequent development of the various missiles under the AGNI series. Okay, so now if we talk about the AGNI-1, it had a range of 700 to 1200 kilometers. It actually has a range because it is still operational, and it is a medium range ballistic missile. Okay, and if we talk about AGNI-2, again a medium range ballistic missile with a range of 2000 to 3500 kilometers, still operational. AGNI-3, okay, it is intermediate range an intermediate range ballistic missile, okay, and it has a range of 3000 to 5000 kilometers. Agni-4, again an intermediate range ballistic missile with a range of 3500 to 4000 kilometers. And then Agni-5, 7000 to 8000 kilometers. It is an intercontinental ballistic missile. Agni-6, it is under development. It will have a range of 11,000 to 12,000 kilometers. It is again an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now the Agni-P, that is the AGNI-PRIME, which was tested recently, it is a medium range ballistic missile. That this you have to remember, and it has initially a range of 1000 to 2000 kilometers. So maximum would be 2000. This you have to remember. AGNI-PRIME has been developed by whom? DRDO, that is the Defense Research and Development Organization. Okay, it is the 6th missile in the Agni series, and it is a 2-stage surface to surface, because not from air to air or air to surface missile, canister launched. It is the first rail based launch missile in India, and road mobile, solid fuel and medium range ballistic missile, as mentioned earlier. It is intended to deploy in the operational service of the Strategic Forces Command, okay, and it will also have some like features upgrades in the coming times with improved propellants, navigation and guidance system. Okay, and it will be used for the Strategic Forces Command, as mentioned earlier, which is also referred to as the Strategic Nuclear Command. It is basically a part of the India's Nuclear Command Authority, and it is responsible for management and administration of the country's tactical and strategic nuclear weapons stockpile. Okay, so it would be deployed in the operational service, that is Agni-P will be deployed in the operational service of the Strategic Forces Command, and this Strategic Forces Command was created in 2003 by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. Okay, and then Mohan Asthana, he became the Air Marshal, first Commander-in-Chief, and later on it basically evolved. Now this Strategic Forces Command, it is basically responsible for what? To operationalize the directives of the Nuclear Command Authority, which is in under the leadership of the Commander-in-Chief, who is a 3-star rank officer. Nuclear Command Authority of India is what? It is the authority which is responsible for command, control and operational decisions that are regarding India's nuclear weapons program. Okay, and it is headed by the Prime Minister of India. So it is all interconnected. This you have to remember, that Agni-PRIME missile, it will be deployed in the service of the Strategic Forces Command. Important to note that Agni-PRIME can be launched within minutes from national rail network. Okay, and it has minimal visibility. It ensures that there is faster deployment. There is storage safety also, because it is nuclear capable. It has a longer shelf life. Also, it has a very good like state of art communication, navigation and independent launch capability as well. And it is very difficult to detect Agni-PRIME missile, so it has very good stealth capacity, that is known as stealth capacity. Okay, and very significant for India for strategic deterrence, because it now places India among the select nations with rail-based canistered launch systems. It will also give India a geopolitical edge. It will enhance India's nuclear triad survivability, and it is especially important amid the evolving regional security challenges of Pakistan and all. And definitely it will give us operational flexibility, because rail mobility, it complements the road and the silo systems, where like only from certain areas only the missiles can be launched. That is not the case anymore. It can be launched from a railway network also. So of course it complicates the things for our adversaries now. So here we are discussing all the topics with a lot of depth, because a lot of questions that appears in prelims and mains, they demand the conceptual clarity. For instance, in 2023 prelims paper only, a question came where the first statement was, ballistic missiles are jet propelled at subsonic speeds throughout their flights, while cruise missiles are rocket powered only in the initial phase of flight. So here we have discussed about the ballistic missile, like what are ballistic missiles, they follow the projectile motion. Initially they are powered and then they are left unpowered. So of course this statement is incorrect. Okay, so ballistic missiles are jet propelled at subsonic speeds. No, absolutely not. Okay, so ballistic missiles are not like that. They are jet in fact cruise missiles are jet propelled for their entire journey. Okay, and ballistic missiles are rocket powered in the initial phase for their flight, and after the rocket burns, the missile follows a trajectory that is guided by gravity, as it was mentioned here. Similarly, the second statement in the question was Agni-5 is a medium-range supersonic cruise missile, while BrahMos is a solid fueled intercontinental ballistic missile. This statement is again incorrect because Agni-5 is an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, which I had discussed a few moments back. It is developed by India and not a medium-range cruise missile. Agni-5, of course, it uses solid fuel and has a range of over 5,000 kilometers. On the other hand, BrahMos is a supersonic cruise missile which is jointly developed by India and Russia. So, the point of discussing this question was to understand that how we are going to approach a topic, how we are going to understand it conceptually, and then go ahead. Okay, just reading the topic or memorizing it is not important, but to have a conceptual clarity and have an understanding of the backgrounds. For instance, here when we are talking about AGNI-PRIME, we had discussed about the entire Agni missile series, and this is how you interlink the topics and read it for better retention and understanding. This is what is important from your exam point of view. Another question that appeared in 2015 was, with reference to dugong, a mammal found in India, which of the following statements are correct? It is a herbivorous marine animal. Yes, it is correct. It is found along the entire coast of India. An extreme statement. No, that is not correct. It is given legal protection under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Yes, that is absolutely correct. So 1 and 3 would be correct, and the second one would be incorrect. So whenever you are reading a topic, try to find out, search whether any previous year question is there on that particular topic or not, to understand the bent of mind of the examiner, how the questions are framed, so that you can approach the topic, while how to study that topic, what to leave, what to study, and then accordingly you can go ahead. With this, we come to an end of this session. Thank you so much.